When plans for George Washington High School in San Francisco were being made, the architect Timothy Pfluger commissioned Victor Arnautoff through the Works Progress Administration to paint a series of murals depicting the life of George Washington. Arnautoff, a Russian immigrant artist, was a friend to Diego Rivera and was influenced artistically and politically by him. He was part of the contingent of leftist artists who painted murals using the fresco technique throughout San Francisco and California. These muralists worked in the social realist style of the time and produced paintings that depicted historical events through linear narratives, vignettes, and symbols. As an artist and a communist, Arnautoff intended to shed light on America's past and Washington's life through the murals that included the depiction of black slaves picking cotton at Mount Vernon and settlers stepping over a dead Native American, only to establish false treaties with the Native American tribes as they pushed west. The murals and the images within them were powerful then as they are today, and that is partly due to the social realist style and technique of fresco employed. Fresco painting is a very old technique and goes back to at least the Renaissance art of Europe. The best-known fresco painting is The Creation of Adam by Michelangelo as part of the Sistine Chapel. The technique of fresco painting is unique because it's created by working dry pigment into wet plaster. The dry powder pigment merges with the plaster. As the plaster sets, the painting becomes an integral part of the wall. Diego Rivera is probably the best-known modern muralist to use this technique, and his murals can be seen throughout San Francisco, as well as the US, Mexico, and the world. The social realist murals of the 1930s made a huge impact on the world, and their work sparked controversy at various times, from the time their work was unveiled to today. This shows the power of what they were saying and how they said it.
Robert Moses is credited as being the architect and master builder of modern America, and his influence is seen far and wide throughout suburban United States. His decisions favoring highways over public transit and public parks, for example, is the reason we have homogenized suburban sprawl and an unnecessary reliance on cars. His hatred of immigrant labor was proudly displayed as he commissioned men to destroy the detailed Irish, Swedish, and Italian architecture once chiseled into the grandest of New York's iconic buildings. Stripped of their prominent symbols of immigrant labor, these buildings were left naked and vulnerable to the wrecking ball. Buildings that once proudly displayed New York's rich and diverse character lay in rubble and dust, all records of their history removed from historical archives. In the 1960s, Robert Moses, with vast support from New York politicos, wanted to continue his rapacious destruction and was set to demolish historic buildings in Greenwich Village, the hub of culture and art in New York City. Jane Jacobs, a Greenwich Village resident and activist, fought him at the gates, risking her freedom and reputation to do so. Where were the Jane Jacobs of San Francisco to fight the destruction of these 83-year-old murals?
My name is Andrea Murral. I'm a longtime resident of the Bay Area and a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. There's a trend today among liberals and even some who claim to be socialists of attacks on freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of artistic expression. The attempt to destroy the mural at Washington High School is part of this destructive trend, in this case in the name of shielding Native American and African American youth from harm. But effacing this mural and similar acts have nothing to do with the fight to eradicate exploitation and racial oppression. Instead, they undermine the fight. Battles for social and economic justice need to be waged in this country, and we face powerful enemies who profit from the inequality in this society and aren't about to let it go. We need the most robust freedom of ideas to discuss, debate what will be effective and what will not. We cannot allow it to become a norm that some of us can decide for all of us which ideas, whether words or images, are acceptable and which have to be suppressed.
I'm speaking in opposition to the destruction of the Life of Washington mural at George Washington High School. I join with others, including members of the school's Alumni Association, in opposing the destruction of the mural portraying the life of George Washington. Destroying or covering it would be an act of censorship and a blow to freedom of expression that would set a precedent for further such actions. The charge that the mural is a glorification of slavery and the genocide of Native Americans is false. In portraying George Washington, Victor Arnautoff sought to present him with all his contradictions, someone who played a leading role in the American Revolution, while at the same time owning slaves and pushing for settlement of Western lands that led to the genocide of Native Americans.
My name is Lope Yap, Jr. I'm the Vice President of the George Washington High School Alumni Association. I was a panelist and the lone dissenter regarding whitewash Victor Arnautoff's murals. I was the only panelist that offered and considered proactive answers to face but not erase our history. I want to thank the First Nation community for raising real emotional issues. Hopefully we can work together in solving those issues. Through education led by WPA, PWA, history, and most importantly, art experts, those who question Arnautoff's work will hopefully appreciate his artistic value, that he was an ally and never glorified the enslaved, mistreated, and/or oppressed. For example, prior to the unveiling ceremony of Dewey Crumpler's 1974 response murals, several African American alumni students apologized to Crumpler and also to Arnautoff. Their reason? If they knew then, in the late 1960s, what they learned from Crumpler in creating the response murals, their reaction would have been much different than to demonstrate, riot, or vandalize the Arnautoff murals.
Good evening, my name is Stephen Chun. I'm with the Alumni Association. You have our packets. Thank you for your time. I'm reading on behalf of Dewey Crumpler. He's the impressionist that painted the other murals on the other side of the lobby. So what can we do to deal with the students' concerns? Students today read metaphors and symbols differently than we did. The fact that arts education is rarely taught has contributed to this lack of understanding. Murals are hard to read, but students would respond if they got an opportunity to learn about them. The murals, after all, are beautiful educational tools. My point is that art reveals the tensions in society. Censoring it won't address these tensions. A better solution is to give students a way to express themselves and learn from history. Protect the murals as the law demands. The school should consider removing the Washington statue in the entry hall and create a video kiosk that tells the story of the murals, highlighting certain scenes for deeper explication and where students can post their own stories and discuss our ever-evolving views of the past and present.
Good evening, board. I'm Rick Tejada Flores. I'm a filmmaker and former general manager of KIOW. The question before you tonight is not erasing the murals or preserving them. The question is, who owns history? History, as you know, is written by the conquerors. This history of our country was. I doubt if you can find another mural in a public building anywhere in this country that shows George Washington as a slave owner. That was then, this is now. We've moved along, we can say more things. What happened then needs to be addressed. But the people who need to address it are the students, because that's the educational process. It can be done in many ways. I did a quick sketch that I want to show you, which would involve putting a plastic screen over the mural, focusing on what's important in the mural, i.e. black faces and George Washington, and setting the record straight. George Washington was one of 12 presidents who had slaves. That isn't taught in school either. This is how you teach things. You look at it, you comment. Thank you.
My name is Harvey Smith. I'm president of the National New Deal Preservation Association. I'm also a scholar of New Deal art. I've done a great number of tours and presentations on the murals of San Francisco. I also work with the Art Commission to write new signage for Coit Tower. So I know it's quite possible to interpret artworks. I also know that people, when they look at art, they have questions. And I think it's a bit demeaning to think that students, being a former Oakland Unified teacher, that high school students cannot understand a thoughtful interpretation. So this is San Francisco. So this is not Germany in the 1930s. This is not the Soviet Union. So I urge all of you to look at this more broadly, look at the context, look at the art, look at the intentions of the artist, and understand the context that the art was created. So step up, please. My name is
In the same way, the Nazi Party either confiscated or destroyed certain Cubist art, German Expressionist art, or modern art and literature, and then labeled it and displayed it as degenerate, the San Francisco Unified School District and the political and propaganda apparatus that broke the story of the 83-year-old murals being destroyed, which murals depict United States history accurately, by the way, has browbeaten the otherwise disengaged public into labeling these works of art as racist or inappropriate for school content. The unanimous decision to destroy these beautiful frescoes that act as a warning signal to never repeat the horrors of our own history is a chilling reflection of our country's laziness, cynicism, and fealty to propaganda, with a consensual leap into fascism as propaganda, political payoffs, and identity politics take center stage over true leftist commentary.
In the spring of 1992, the exhibition Mining the Museum by conceptual artist Fred Wilson opened at the Maryland Historical Society in Baltimore. Wilson, an artist of color, created a large installation piece made up of smaller vignette installations, which juxtaposed artifacts and art to give new meaning in a contemporary context. The show was made up of objects and art from a previous era, objects that were in storage but still in the collection. They were in storage because they represented attitudes and norms from a racist past. The objects range from kitsch representing stereotypes of people of color, like ceramic figurines and wooden cigar store Indians, to Klan hoods, pillory posts, and iron shackles. In one vignette, Wilson placed 19th century Baroque-inspired hand-carved chairs facing a pillory post, creating a chilling reminder of not only the savagery of slavery, but the class and race distinctions that kept slavery in place for so long. Other displays included a Klan hood placed inside a baby pram, or 6 cigar store Indians facing away from the audience toward the wall. Wilson also commented on the museum and art world by displaying several mannequins in museum security uniforms next to a famous Picasso painting that was inspired by African art, to show that not only were people of color, who usually work as museum security guards, invisible to museum patrons, but African culture is invisible to contemporary art, despite its heavy influence on a major foundation of modern art. Mining the museum was a way to take problematic objects and recontextualize them, which encouraged visitors to interpret the works however they saw it, to think critically, and acquire a new perspective.
It's important to remember that society places meaning on objects, whether the objects are utilitarian, like shackles, prams, or chairs, or strictly symbolic, like flags, hoods, or religious artifacts. Artists take these meanings and reflect them back to us in a broader context. How we read them all depends on us, our worldview, and the general cultural outlook at the time. This is why art, literature, and creative culture are often at the center of controversies. Culture, society, and politics all cycle from the conservative and reactionary right to the progressive left or leftist. How we interpret what art shows us depends on where we are as a society in this cycle. We believe that the current climate is both centrist while moving to the reactionary right, and there is a cynical use of identity politics combined with general mistrust of critical perspectives, especially those perspectives from the far left, in order to gain absolute control over the cultural narrative in America today. As a child in public school in the Bay Area in California, I was required to give oral presentations on these very murals, and even as a little girl in primary school, I knew the exploitation and genocide our country was founded on was wrong. It's this leftist perspective from the past that questions the origins of the United States and its founders and their roles in slavery and the genocide of Native Americans that is what's really at the center of this current debate, spearheaded by the San Francisco Unified School District. The content in the murals is deliberately being misrepresented as the opposite of their intended message and meaning. And right now, history is being rewritten as it seems these murals are the only ones in existence that depict George Washington as he really was, a slaveholder, a racist, a colonizer, and a murderer. Why are we allowing this true depiction of this founding father to be destroyed? Why are we putting these murals, which depict actual United States history, as horrific as it is, on trial? Aren't you concerned that an incorrect, magical thinking curriculum might eventually be taught in its place?